February was Black History Month, and March is Women's History Month, so there's no better time to celebrate the legacy of Star Trek's Nichelle Nichols. A new book for children was released in late February. Entitled To Boldly Go How Nichelle Nichols and Star Trek Helped Advance Civil Rights, the book makes good on its title's promise, taking a look at how Nichols and Trek fought against racism in the 1960s. I had a chance to catch up with the writer Angela Dalton and illustrator Lauren Semmer to talk about the book and the late, great Nichelle Nichols. I'm T. Rick Jones, and this is your Daily Star Trek News. So I want to start with a basic question, and actually, Lauren, I'm going to ask you first.
Okay.
I'm assuming you're a Star Trek fan?
I watched it growing up as a kid a lot on the local news channel. It was like Channel 9, I think it was. It was like after the news, they would always play it. So like I watched it growing up a lot. And so when the book came along, I had some familiarity with it and with Nichelle as well. So yeah.
That's cool. And
Yeah.
Angela, you talk a lot in the book about your origins with Star Trek, but just recap for me. Tell me about the red Kool-Aid and Star Trek and your parents and all that.
Yeah, kind of the same, similar to Lauren. I remember watching it, the reruns as a kid. And every Saturday night, it was my mom, my dad, me, and a glass of Kool-Aid, red Kool-Aid. It was like really the only time that my parents were cool with me drinking something that was that sugary and that processed. So that's where it became like a Star Trek treat. But even like continuing on, my cousin's husband actually was just such a tech file. Like he had every laser, like he had laserdisc, he had beta recorders and camcorders and everything. And so I would go to his house and he had like every Star Trek movie on disc, and we would have like weekend marathons of watching all of the Star Trek movies, like Star Trek motion picture, the Wrath of Khan. And then growing even older than that, then came along the Next Generation, right? Like Geordie LaFord, come on. So like Geordie LaFord, Whoopi Goldberg as Guinan, and Wesley Crusher. Like I loved the Next Generation. And then I became a little bit older, and so we had a little bit of a break. And but it's been really fun to get back into all of the spin-offs like Picard and Discovery and Below Deck. So it's been like fun to kind of reconnect with it, especially through writing this book.
How did you come up with the idea for doing a book about Nichelle Nichols, for kids? Was it your idea, or did HarperCollins approach you, and did you guys conceive it together, or did you get sort of hooked up? Did HarperCollins put you together?
Yeah, I was literally standing in line at Target, and I turned to my left and there was an end cap with this beautiful 50th anniversary of Time magazine of Star Trek. And of course on the cover is like the gorgeous Nichelle Nichols, right? So it's like, well, have to buy that. And so I bought it, I took it home, and just like reading through it like a little kid, like all the stories and looking at all the pictures and learning about all of the costuming, and then also really about the impact of the show that Gene Roddenberry and Star Trek had on mass media and American television. But then like a couple of days later, I was watching Drunk History, and they did a reenactment of this moment that I'd never heard of, which was really weird because considering just how much we watch Star Trek, how much we love Star Trek in my family. And of course, like, Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., to hear this story, or to watch the story about, Nichelle Nichols and her leaving Star Trek because of the amount of racism and prejudice that she was receiving on the production lot. And just this fateful meeting that she had with Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. and him telling her, like, I am a Trekker. Like, this is the only show, like, Coretta and I let our children watch. And so at that moment, I was like, okay, there has to be a picture book about Nichelle Nichols, number one. And there has to absolutely be a picture book about this meeting. I mean, again, Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. is during the Civil Rights Movement. And in my research, there was no book that existed for kids in the picture book world. And so I just took that as a sign that I had to write it. So I wrote the script, and my agent and I submitted it to a few different publishers, but HarperCollins was the one who really wanted to publish it.
And Lauren, you
Yeah.
were familiar with the show, but you weren't as much of a fan as Angela is and was. Did you do a lot of research? Did you watch a lot of episodes?
So I was approached by the publisher, HarperCollins, after they took the manuscript on, and I read the manuscript, and I was so moved by it. I just was like, it's such an interesting period of time in history, and it's such an important story. And I think what Star Trek represents is this amazing idea of everybody being able to work together. So that was a part of kind of a story I wanted to tell. And I did have to do a lot of research. I knew who Nichelle was, and I knew about her as an artist, but understanding that she created the role on the show was like huge. And so I really kind of wanted to research all the little facets of the role, because that's a big part of who she was as an artist. So I did a lot of research. I looked at a lot of YouTube videos of clips from the past. It's hard to find some of these older ones, and that was really fun to do that. And just because I had to kind of create this character based on the character. I couldn't you can't exactly just copy something, and I didn't want to. I wanted to create sort of impression of her and a portrait of who she was. So I did a lot of research, a lot of YouTube videos, reading, just looking at all period of time and fashion, and trying to kind of develop who she was at this time in her life.
I mean, Lauren did such a great job. You would think like she was a Trekker, and had been for many years, because the level of research and just how the illustrations came out is just like, they're just masterful. They're beautiful. They're gorgeous.
I am like more so now, because I feel like the people who are just like the most interesting, smart people. And then you just see the show and you're just like, this is like amazing. And it's just really, it was a fun. That's why I love my job, is I get to kind of like jump into someone else's world and like learn about it. Then I take it with me. It's just the best. So.
Were you working on this when Nichelle was still alive? Did she know that a book was coming out, about a children's book was coming out?
Oh, go ahead.
I was gonna say, I'm not sure. I was working on it when she was alive still.
Yeah.
I think it was
I'm not sure if she knew about it. I know in 2019 they were planning her farewell tour in Burbank, California, and I live in Oakland, California. So I was like, okay, I'm gonna get this book in my hand. I'm gonna go see Miss Nichols, show her the book, and then the pandemic hit. And so I had a very brief email exchange with her sister, Marion Smothers, who knew the book was coming out. And so I believe that she was told, but also towards the end of her life, she was suffering from dementia. Yeah. And she had had a series of strokes. So, her mental capabilities weren't, 100%, unfortunately. And then she passed before the book was actually published. So unfortunately, we never got to meet her, even though I was hoping. I mean, yeah, it was. It was. I mean, obviously, you want to, the business behind bookmaking, you want to, have the most impact. But it also felt that it was just more in her honor. It was like the perfect way to. Because she had just passed in July of 2022, and they knew her birthday was December 28th, and so they kind of wanted to split the difference between that, of like when her birthday was and when Black History Month happened. And books also come out generally on a Tuesday of each month, every week. And so, so of course there was, the alignment of Black History Month, but then Women's History Month comes after as well. So we've got two chances to celebrate Miss Nichols.
Take me through what the way a book like this happens. Take me through the collaboration from the pitch all the way up to when it gets published.
Sure. So, after I saw the Drunk History episode, I started my research, and that entailed, reading Miss Nichols' autobiography, Beyond Uhura, which was it was incredible, because again, I didn't really know that much about her as a person. I knew her as the actress, but to find out, that she had this like just amazing life of, she um was a ballerina dancer at a very young age, and in a time when like most Black women, Black children didn't have access to that type of instruction or even that type of dance. And so she was excelled at it. She was actually admitted into the Chicago Academy of Ballet, that for a Black girl during her time was unheard of. And she knew she wanted to be a performer. And so like to read her story of how she became a dancer for Duke Ellington, and then to go and be on this little film called Porgy and Bess, with just a couple people like Sidney Poitier and Dorothy Dandridge and like Harry Belafonte, like all of Black royalty, Hollywood royalty on this film. And so that's where she got her start in film. And those a lot of those actors and actresses became her lifelong friends. And so, and then she comes to Star Trek thinking, well, I can be anywhere, I belong everywhere. And she gets this pushback from a studio and faces all this racism. And what was really interesting to me was to learn about, we have a tendency in this country to think about the civil rights movement only happening in the South, that racism was only in the South. And I think her book for me was a reminder, a very needed reminder that racism was everywhere. So everywhere she went, it didn't matter if it was Salt Lake City or the Mason-Dixon borderline, she was dealing with very extreme conditions of racism and just trying to survive. And so I was reading her book. Sorry, I kind of got off on a tangent there, but I was reading her book, and there's hundreds, I think Lauren kind of alluded to this, there's like hundreds of hours of interviews that she's done over the course of her life. So it was really fun to just sit down and watch those interviews and hearing her voice talk about this story, tell the story about the meeting with Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. and what led after that, her impact on diversifying NASA. So I wrote the story. It took me probably about a year and a half, almost 2 years to write it. We, again, gave it to my agent. We put it on submission, and HarperCollins acquired it. And at that point, usually in traditional publishing, the author and the illustrator never meet each other. I didn't know, I had a list, I knew the short list of illustrators that they were going to be speaking to. And I was really happy to see Lauren's name on the list. She'd been an illustrator of this beautiful book called The ABCs of Black History. And just was such a fan of her work. And so at that point, Lauren, I'm going to pass it over to you because I don't know what happened behind the curtain once.
Yeah. So essentially, I mean, basically, I just was looking through my inbox one day and I got this email, and it was, Dear Lauren, we want to offer you this picture book story, and here's the manuscript. Let us know if you're interested. And I was just finishing another project, and I read it, and I was just instantly like, yes, because it was just, to me, it talked about an important aspect of history. And it was also about an incredible person. I mean, the iconography and imagery around Star Trek, like as an artist, is like so fun. Like, it's just one of those things where you're just like, yes. This is like hitting all the boxes, ticking all the boxes. I really want to do this. So, I did take some time with it because you have to, it's a commitment to do a book. It's a year and a half of your life. It's a lot of time. You have to make sure you're ready to do it. And so I responded when I was ready, and I was like, yes, I want to do this. And we worked it out. And then from that point on, from there, I kind of sat with the manuscript for a while, and then they give you kind of a layout of what it might look like with the text and on what page the words would be on. And then you just kind of start from there. I do sketches. There's lots of sketches. There's lots of revisions, especially with somebody who's a historical figure. You getting the likeness right, and getting the style, making sure you get all the right elements to the art is really important, and I think it was really important to everybody at HarperCollins, and as well as obviously with Angela to really honor her in the right way. So we did back and forth about that, and then eventually, I think it took me maybe a year to do the art for it. It's like I don't remember, but at least I think it was a year until I was done with the art. So it's and it's a lot of time you spend on it, and it's and when you're done with it, it's really sad. When you finish, you're like, It's like saying goodbye to your baby or something, you know. So it was, you know, and I finished. I was sad. I was like, okay, I guess I'm done with this for now. But now it's fun. We get to talk about it. So, so that's kind of how it comes together. And I think that's basically how most storybooks come together. Is there's not a lot of interaction between us. We have the brand helps kind of, the publisher kind of helps, you know, facilitate a lot of that, which it's good because it's just keeps things moving. So
Now, Angela, you mentioned something in the book actually that I didn't know, and I thought I knew everything.
Yes.
But, but I
Got
did not realize that Nichelle got involved in ballet because she got sick.
Mhm.
What did she get? What childhood illness did she have? Do you know?
I don't know, and she didn't list it in the book, but she was in the hospital for like a month, maybe even a little bit longer. And so it had to do, part of her treatment was vitamin C. So she drank a lot of orange juice. She did write about that, but I don't know if she actually knew what the diagnosis was, but she was in the hospital for a really long time. So yeah, so ballet was a way for her to regain her strength. The doctor had said, you know, she needs to do something active, and that's what she wanted to do.
What is it that makes Nichelle Nichols such an important figure in Black history? You know, her herself, you know, I know the story, and a lot of Trekkies will know the story of her meeting Martin Luther King and all of that. But what is it about her that keeps, for 55 years now, we've been talking about Nichelle Nichols. Why is that?
I think it's a combination of many things. I think one is that she loved the conferences, the Comic Con. She loved her fans so much that, you know, she was one of the few actors, original actors, who showed up, you know, like who went to every conference that she was invited to. You know, she spent the time, you know, that was her community. And so I think that's one reason why, is because of her commitment to her fans and her loyalty to her fans. I think also because of her impact on just so many famous Black people after Star Trek. You know, I mean, like I said, Whoopi Goldberg speaks of how she impacted her. Dr. Mae Jemison speaks on how she impacted her. Neil deGrasse Tyson talks about her impact on him getting into astronomy. And so I think it's also, that's why her name keeps coming up, is because I don't think people really understand the rings of impact that she has made in her 50 years that go beyond the television show. And that's why we continue to celebrate her and honor her. And again, you know, diversifying NASA, that was no easy feat, and she is responsible for that. And I don't think that gets talked enough about as well. So I think it's just because of her impact that she made, and just how it spanned out. That's why we continue to honor her.
Yeah. Lauren?
I think I can speak to why I wanted to honor her a little bit. I think that she is a creator, and she created her world. She created her characters. She made something out of nothing. I mean, she really did. She created something that I think, when you talk about representation, Nichelle is a perfect example of representation, because she created this really amazing, strong character. She played the character. You know, she, like Angela was saying, she met with people, she connected with people. And I think that it's really important. She created this thing. And I think we need to, that's why she's celebrated so much. I know I wanted to celebrate her as an artist, you know, as a Black female artist. I thought that was so cool. And it's just amazing to do a book about that. Also, you know, just the interest, I have a lot of the same interests as her. So personally, I wanted to honor that. And I think that's a huge part of it. I think people see her, she's just a representation of what we want to see, you know?
Yeah.
That,
Yeah.
that was a good answer.
It was a great answer.
That was yours. I like yours too.
She is one character I always felt like I wanted more of, and you actually address that in the book, that, you know, her part keeps getting cut and stuff, and I always regret that there weren't more storylines about her. You know, she was one of my favorites. And
Well, it's kind of interesting to see what they're doing with these new reboots, because it
Mhm.
feels like they are giving more storylines, they are giving more importance to Uhura as a character on the show than she got in the original series. So it's kind of interesting to see that come into fruition now. Also, is like you get to see her backstory, that she's from Africa, you know, that she speaks Swahili, she's the commander of the communication center, like all of that you didn't get to see before.
What is it about red Kool-Aid? Do you just like it? You drink it once a year, I read somewhere.
For one TV night.
Well, it's twofold. I mean, it was definitely my childhood, you know, like Kool-Aid was it, but also like in the Black community, red Kool-Aid is symbolic for Juneteenth. Is one of the foods that symbolizes, you know, the blood that was shed during slavery. So it's like something that is used to, you know, in honor of that. So in my family, you know, red Kool-Aid was like this symbolic, you know, symbolism of Juneteenth, and there's also just a really sugary treat for me as a kid.
So I got to the end of the book, what I thought was the end of the book, and I was like, it was great. She spent a lot of time on Star Trek, but she didn't mention any of the NASA stuff. So I was a little disappointed. And then I turned the page and there's a whole epilogue about the NASA stuff. And for a minute I was like, oh, well, sequel. But then you touched on it in the end and you really boiled down her NASA career. I did some research on her when she died for her obituary and just went down a rabbit hole of all her like NASA videos and all of that stuff. I was on it for days, even though I didn't need all that research. But yeah, it's really fascinating, I think, what the impact she had on NASA.
Yeah. It was hard to figure out where to drop in on the story because as much as I would have loved to start with the NASA story, since there weren't any previous books about Nichelle Nichols, it felt difficult to talk about her but not have that backstory, not to understand, you know, why her impact on NASA was so important. And so, and again, because I was like, if I haven't, as an X-year-old woman, I'm not going to get married, but if I didn't know that at this age, I'm pretty sure little kids don't know this story about Martin Luther King Jr. And I think also for me personally, you know, as a kid, it was, I got teased a lot by my cousins that I watched Star Trek. They were just like, that's like not like, what is that show? That's for nerds. And so I kind of wish that I had known that Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. was a Trekker, because that would have been my response. Like, Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. watches it, so you're dumb. So I just really wanted, you know, I wanted kids to really understand who she was, you know, because that was really like her pivotal moment and how she was able to make impact because of what happened. So, and you know, you only have so many pages in a book and a picture book as well. So it's like 40 pages. That's what you get. Go. But I really wanted to make sure that piece in NASA was a part of the book. That was really important to me because, again, I didn't think a lot of people knew about that.
You do not pull your punches in this book about racism either. Is there a line? First of all, why is it important to teach kids about racism and racism in this instance in the 60s? But also, is there a line you have to walk where you have to be like, I have to be a little bit careful because it's kids, or do you just go for it?
Well, I think for this book, I kind of went for it. I mean, you know, especially what we're seeing with book bans that are happening in 2023,
Yeah.
And critical race theory being challenged, and AP African American Studies being, you know, disbanded and taken away from school curriculums. I think it's really important to talk about racism and to talk about it honestly. Because there's so much revisionism that's happening right now. And for me, you know, as a Black woman, as a Black girl, I wasn't protected from that. I had to watch, you know, keep your eye on the prize documentaries. I had to watch all of those things happening. Yeah. And, you know, it's the truth. And so I think kids can handle the truth. It's messy, it's hard, it doesn't feel good, but it's honest. And I think kids deserve that honesty. They deserve the truth in everything that they read. And so it was really important for me to put that in there.
Now, Lauren, this is not the first time you've been involved in a book for kids about Black history. Did you
No.
write the ABCs or did you illustrate?
I'm the illustrator on that book. Yeah.
The illustrator, yeah. I haven't read it, but I've seen pieces of it, and it looks, you've got a really great style, colorful and interesting to look at. So
Thank you. Thank you. It's a fun job.
And it's a best-selling book too.
It is, yeah. It's kind of fun to see it be all over the place. People.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
Well, thank you both so much. Angela, Dalton, Lauren, Semmer, this has been a delight. Thank you so much.
Thank you for having us.
Yeah, thank you.
Boldly Go, how Nichelle Nichols and Star Trek helped advance civil rights. It's kind of blurring out on my screen. You can pick it up wherever books are sold, and it's delightful. And if you have a kid, or even if you don't and want to pick it up, I think you should. It's a great book. Thank you both so much. Have a great night.
You too. Thank you.